Hi there, my name's Mick Briggs. I'm coming to the end of my 22 years in the Royal Air Force as a technician, and most of my career was based on the aircraft that's right behind me, the C-130 Hercules. The C-130 Hercules came into Royal Air Force service in 1966. It replaced both the Argosy and the Beverley in the light transport role and tried to take over from the Shorts Belfast, which we only did 10 years of service, that you can see here at the museum. The Royal Air Force Hercules is actually a mixture of two variants. It was the E and the H model combined, which basically meant we had more powerful engines and slightly weaker wings. Made for better fuel economy, but actually it gave us some issues in the future, which I'll talk about in a second. As you can see behind me, it just so happens that the engine that we've got here, the Allison T56 turboprop engine, is in green camouflage and on the rear and grey at the front. Where it changes is the line where the engine actually is mounted to the aircraft. Now, if the aircraft over-torques, if the blades on the propeller spin too fast, it can over-torque and overstress the weaker wing mounts. We call them truss mounts. And we used to have to change them for a pastime. But it used to add a good 11 days to a servicing. Behind this cowling is the gas turbine compressor. This is our source of hot pressurised gas to allow us to start our engines from anywhere in the world without any ground support whatsoever. This is where the door would open and suck air in. It would then be ignited and then eject just here. And when you are on detachment out in places like Norway and Bardufoss, it's a great place to keep your hands warm. This is where they would mount the IRCM head, the infrared countermeasures head. Because we've got two on this side and two on the other side, massive engines spinning that are really hot. Any air heat-seeking missiles that would be thrown at this aircraft, we could defeat by the IRCM head that's just here. There's much more to see inside. Let's go and have a look. Oh, wow. Oh, it's been ages since I've been in one of these. Oh, amazing. Yeah, it's taken the clock back a lot of years. But basically, yeah, this is my baby. This is what I started my career on. I've worked most of my career on these. And actually, I had my first flight in one of these when I was 8 years old. Coming back from Cyprus. My father's in the army and was on tour out there, and we got a flight back from Cyprus as an 8-year-old with my headset on and a boom mic, and I was running up and down here and then on the flight deck and fell in love with her then. This configuration is not one that we would normally see other than air tests and different things like that, because it's full flat floor. There's no roll equipment on board at all at the moment. There's no seats, there's no roller conveyor, and there's no specialist equipment on board at the moment. It's been stripped out obviously for the museum. However, it does give you a really good view of what the Hercules was designed around. If you have a look straight down the back of the aircraft, you can see that this whole area in the centre is roughly the size of an ISO container, so that you can load it with a standard pallet size. Reason behind that is they wanted interoperability. Obviously Lockheed Martin wanted to be able to sell these to all over the world. Yeah, these items here is what we would use for the stretcher fits. The handle of the stretcher would fit in just here and be clipped into place. They slide up and down, obviously like this, and then click into place. And that then gives you the hard standing for your stretcher to be on. But they're also very handy just to hook your bags onto as well when you're flying, which is great. Gets things out of the way. Okay, so the roll equipment fits that we used to have on this aircraft then, obviously flat floor is for air tests and things, it's just to clean the aircraft out. The other ones that we'd have is a full seat configuration, where you would, on this particular version, be able to fit 198 passengers on board in absolute comfort. Not really. Basically, they would be webbed seats. Anybody that's ever been sat on one of these will know exactly what I mean. The seats would be back to the wall, and there'd be a stanchion down the middle here going all the way down the centre of the aircraft, and on there would be seats coming out, and the gap between your knees would be roughly 2 inches if you were about 5'1". If you're anything more than that, you're going to be hitting knees. But if it was like this, full flat floor, it's like being in your own little private jet. or being quite a smelly one, and noisy as well. But we'll talk about that later. But other things that can go onto this aircraft then, you can have a roller conveyor fit, which is the air delivery fit, where the whole of this aircraft would be layered up with roller conveyor, which is just like roller bearings on little brackets. That allows whatever we want to get out of the aircraft to get out of the aircraft quickly. Now, it doesn't have to be an air delivery fit. You can actually use that purely to help load. So if you've got 4 or 5 big pallets worth of cargo that's tied down with nets, the movers, the aircraft movers, the guys that load the aircraft, they would load it obviously from the rear using forklifts or different bits of kit. They could actually load it flat and then push it on board, lock it in place, and we're good to go. We can load various things on board the aircraft, from helicopters right the way through to small armoured personnel carriers and tanks and things like the small Scorpion tank. It's a bit heavy and it will wreck the floor a little bit, so we try not to do that unless we really have to. One thing about that is if you put a Land Rover on board the aircraft, what you have to do is, instead of tying the whole vehicle down, what you need to do is actually tie the running gear. So it's around the axle, it's around the chassis, if you like, of the vehicle. So anything lower than the suspension, which basically means that that vehicle is then detached to the aircraft in the strongest way possible. It's to stop it from bouncing around and potentially becoming loose. And the best thing about that, from my point of view, being the supernumerary crew, was most of the time at the back end I would have nothing to do. So I used to get in these vehicles at times and try and get to sleep in them, because it would give you that extra bit of comfort, and it was brilliant. It was like having a little isolated world on your own for 5 minutes. It was very good. Because this aircraft is very loud. It's around about 140 decibels. It's loud enough to need the in-ear ear protection plus the over-the-top ear protection as well. You would not have conversations unless you are within a few inches of each other. It is very loud. So when you see it on films and you see people chatting amongst themselves on board aircraft like this one in the air, I'm sorry, it doesn't happen that way. Okay, the C-130 Hercules has 2 hydraulic systems on board. This one here is what we call the utility system, and you can see it's quite large. We have at the top here, we have the reservoir, that is where all the spare oil is stored while it's operating. This particular side of the aircraft, this utility system, will give you everything you need to operate the aircraft, flying controls, brakes, and the like. If you think about it, when you're on a passenger plane on your way to Tenerife, everything's hidden. No one's walking around with torches checking for leaks, but the first thing that the loadmaster would do when the aircraft's in the climb is to come back here and make sure that the hydraulic system isn't leaking. So we would check all the connections, all the pipe work, have a look, check the filters to make sure there's nothing dripping out, and into the bottom drip tray, which we keep scrupulously clean because we're good engineers and we do that sort of thing. On the pipe work, as you can see, there's a little circle. That's the symbolic method of seeing whether it's a hydraulic system, but there's also a yellow and a blue colour. Both the yellow and blue together indicate hydraulics. Also, you'll notice that there's an arrow on there which is telling the idea, the flow of the oil in the system, to make sure that it goes the right way around whenever we do any servicing on it. So we have the mic tell here so that the crew can communicate. Now, bearing in mind, like I mentioned before, the aircraft is extremely loud in flight. It's about 140 decibels. So without this piece of kit, there's no way that they'd actually be able to communicate. There will be hand signals and it wouldn't go right. This is my favourite place to be on the Hercules. This is where I used to do my resting when we were flying. I used to put a stretcher back here, attached to the brackets just here, and off a webbing strap hanging from the roof. It's part of the aeromedical evacuation roll fit. But we'd put our stretchers up at this particular location, just rear of the wing, because this would be the lowest amount of vibration and the most comfortable place to be on the aircraft whilst it was in flight. We used to put the stretcher just about up here, put my sleeping bag, have a little cushion, have a little pillow, and then I'd look out this window, and I'll never forget looking out this window about 30,000 feet, looking down at the pyramids. It was absolutely amazing, and I couldn't believe I was being paid for it at the time. But that's where I used to sit, just there. So we're here now at the back end of the aircraft. This is where everything gets either loaded or unloaded. At the moment, obviously, everything's all shut up and closed up. When the aircraft's in flight doing an air delivery drop, this particular part of the ramp would be flat in the same lay as the cargo floor. So if the 47 AD guys would throw this stuff out the back, whether it be a Land Rover or humanitarian aid or supplies, they would make sure that it was ready to go, and they would then, on the command from the pilot, using the red and green lights, just like you've seen in the movies, they would then push whatever needed to go out the back, out of the back. Also, this is where you would load equipment on board, and also you can drop this ramp all the way down to the floor. We could then load the aircraft with vehicles like Land Rovers or small tanks, as we said before, but also we can unload helicopters once they've been rigged to fly on board an aircraft like this, so the rotor's taken off and the things like that. Things like the Gazelle or maybe even the Puma under certain fits can fit just about into this aircraft. Yeah, as well, this is where the toilets are on this aircraft, down the back end. You've got a urinal to my right and a urinal to my left behind the screen there. But you've also got the slide down seated toilet as well. So as we said, this is the urinals. This is where the gents can go to the loo whilst on flight. These aircraft used to fly for 7 hours on a max route, so you can imagine you need to go to the loo quite a bit. Have to apologise here for 70 Squadron. It seems that your zap has been put onto the urinal for target practice for somebody. Don't know who that is, but yeah, do apologise for that. And obviously, now we've got the urinals, we also need somewhere to go to our number twos, and for where the ladies need to go to the toilet. Now, this is the height of luxury. We have the platform that the toilet used to sit on. The toilet would be sat here, and it would consist of purely a metal bucket, a white metal bucket, with a seat on that was filled with Recasan, the same blue chemical that you have in chemical toilets, with no way of flushing. The only way to actually clean these out is to lift the bucket out and take it out. Unfortunately, one of the tests that the ground crew used to have to do on board the aircraft was to make sure there was nothing in the toilet, so it didn't need to be removed. And they used to use, unfortunately, after being told lots and lots of times not to, they would still use the lollipop. This is actually designed to lock the power doors at the back of the aircraft. However, they're also a very, very good scoop. So if you ever see a real one of these on an old aircraft like a Hercules, and if it's got a strange blue tinge to it, don't lick the lollipop. As ground crew, one of our main jobs would be in the morning when the aircraft was due to fly, we would make sure that we put power on safely. And to do that, we need to start up on the flight deck. And the first thing on the power on checks that we would do, we would have to come in and check that this was off. This is the sextant mount, make sure the heater's off. Yeah, we used to navigate by the stars in an emergency, and this was fitted right up until I left in 2005. And when you've turned off the sextant heater behind there and made sure the galley was off and a few bits and pieces, you would then make sure every single switch on the whole of the flight deck was in either safe, off, or normal. This is to make sure that when you do put a power on, that nothing happens. You don't want to hear any noises, you don't want to hear anything whirring, because you know that you've made a mistake then. So yes, you have to check every single one of these switches and all of these to make sure that they're safe, off, or normal. And on long flights, unfortunately the captain and co-pilot sometimes would use like a travel Scrabble or something like that, and they would play it over the top of the throttle quadrant, which is just here. And the amount of times that we used to have, we've lost our Q, Z and R, we would have to then go in underneath and actually fish them out because they're foreign objects, because you can't have them interfering with the flying control system, and in this case the engine control system of the aircraft. What, you still here?